think we know, but what's your stance on term limits?
Well, yeah, I told you, and you know my wife's stance also. But I agree with them. I think it's going to be very difficult to pass them into law because it's the old guys that are in the committee spots where the laws we pass through. But let me get to that in a minute. I've also, by the way, said that I'm going to take a 20% pay cut in Congress because I think that, especially in this environment with people getting pay cuts in the private sector, Congress should not be living a lifestyle that's higher than a middle-class family here. Now, take me back to where we were talking about just before there.
Term limit.
The term limit issue. One of the solutions I've put forward is to cap these races. Cap some of these races. Say a House race at $1 million, or a senatorial race at $5 or $6 million, depending on how big the state is. Why is that a good solution in my view? Because the problem here is that we don't have competition. Look at the National Football League. I think it's changing its rules, but when it had salary cap in place, you had a good game on any given Sunday. Most teams were able to compete with each other. The problem we have today isn't so much that there's no time limit on a term of Congress or Senate, is that when these guys get down to Congress, they've got so much money thrown their way in campaign contributions that it becomes almost impossible for a challenger, an average American running, to defeat them. I mean, you're against all odds anyways because they have the advantages of the media, they can mail things out of their office for free, but then you're facing on top of it a 3-to-1, 4-to-1 fundraising disadvantage. So, you cap the races, you create competition at the state level, the federal level, and you force these guys to come home and actually explain themselves to get the votes, rather than rely on overwhelming fundraising to just get themselves elected with TV commercials and saturation of ads. So I think to get to where we need to be, but at the end of the day, the goal has got to be people in Congress for less time, and so I think there's more than one way to skin that cat.
May I have a problem with this? So what you were just talking about with term limits, you decided to involve campaign finance reform. And as we have seen with the McCain-Feingold reform, the best laid plans can still be circumvented and end up causing more harm than good. So this is...
I think the McCain-Feingold bill was weak. It was a failure from the start.
Okay.
It did nothing, talks nothing to the large source of political action committee money that's out there. There's all sorts of court cases out there about who can and should be able to give money, and all this is open to debate. But the reality is that all that bill did was protect incumbents. It was written by incumbents. We've seen a greater discrepancy between challengers and incumbents since that bill went into effect. I think it was a half-hearted effort and really didn't do anything revolutionary, which is what we need done now when it comes to campaign financing. We have legal corruption in this country today, and it's got to be addressed. We've got extremely big problems, right? I'll be honest with you. I think the national debt right now and the fiscal problems we face are bigger problems than those. But in the long run, if we're going to strengthen this republic and bring back the citizen legislature, we have got to somehow limit the amount of money that goes into these races for incumbents. Because it's become a system where these guys go down there, they know where these checks are coming in from, $5,000, $10,000 a clip. How can a challenger, Joe Citizen, compete with that, raising $50 a pop at a hot dog barbecue? He's not going to be able to do it. And so we need to take a hard look at this, and I think it gets to the question, what kind of country do we want to live in? Do we want a country run by professional politicians, or are we going to go back to citizen legislators who go down there and serve, do the job, and come back?
So your solution is to increase regulation?
No, I don't think it's regulation. You cap a race, you cap a race. I mean, you would be amazed at the amount of regulation that goes in today when we have unfettered, essentially limitless campaign contributions. There's reporting periods all the time. I mean, the regulations are there. The question is, as a country, do we want to see a situation where only multimillionaires and incumbents are being elected, or do we want to have a country where normal people can run for office and win? And every time I ask people that, they prefer the latter. So if you tell me we've got a problem here in this government, and it has nothing to do with the fact that we have got professional politicians, then I'll maybe reconsider what I've said. But until somebody shows me some proof that we don't have a serious problem on our hands with professional politicians down there, I think we ought to look to limit the amount of money that goes into these races.
What constitutes an appropriate earmark request?
Appropriate number of earmark requests. They're up. Let me explain this. Chris Murphy, when he ran for office in 2006, he ran on a zero earmark pledge, and that was one of the top 5% of earmarkers in the entire Congress. So we're going to hold him to account on that in this election. But you know what? There's ways to get legitimate projects back to the state, to the towns, because they've given money. They've sent a whole lot of money down there. But there's a way to do it that doesn't involve earmarking. You get it vetted by the departments, it's vetted by the House and the Senate, it goes through a competitive process. Now, let me say this, I'd rather the money never went down there in the first place. The problem isn't that we've got a messed up system on how much pork comes back and how much comes back for this project or that project. It's that we're sending that much money down in the first place, and that it has to go through Washington before it comes back. We, as a state, Connecticut, we get 60 cents back, I believe, for every dollar we send down. So we're losing 40% of our tax money for a handling fee down in Washington, D.C. So that's insane. We need to limit the amount of money we're sending down to Washington. In the meantime, there's a legitimate way to bring back legitimate projects like highways, that kind of thing, sewage projects back here without resorting to these earmarks. And most of these earmarks you see, they're not necessary. They're generally done by politicians to get a press release or to make a narrow constituency happen. And in other words, they're done for political gain.
Quick follow-up on that.
But in the interest of time, I think we're going to...
Okay. Will you vote for a bill that was very unpopular with your constituents?
I find it hard to imagine a situation where a very, very unpopular bill was before me and I was considering to vote for it, because I believe in the common sense of this district. I don't think there's things that we need to do as a nation that this district's not ready to do. You'll have to, that's a very big hypothetical there. There may be instances where there are extenuating circumstances, but I'll tell you this, I'll never vote against something or for something just because I know it'll help me get reelected. I'm going to do it because it's in the best interest of the voters. And I got to believe 99.9% of the time, the voters are going to know what's in the best interest of themselves. So I don't see that issue arising. But in the rare chance that it did, yeah, of course, I would vote to do the right thing.